What's up guys, it's BSRC here with RC Nightmare. This tutorial we're going to show you how to rebuild and adjust your slipper clutch. Now almost every RC vehicle out there has a slipper clutch. It's designed to protect your transmission from your motor. What do I mean by that? Well, when you're driving around and you're bashing, you're jumping hard, you're coming down from jumps, your motor's spinning this fast, but your tires are only spinning this fast, the slipper clutch will allow a little bit of slip in the transmission so you don't snap an axle or break a gear. So the slipper clutch is essential in making sure that your car lasts a long time and your transmission and driveline components stay in good shape. Well, over time, because it does wear down, the slipper clutch will need to be rebuilt. And here we have, you can see a Summit that we ran pretty hard with a Mamba Monster system on it. So we fried the slipper clutch real good for you guys to show you the worst case scenario on a rebuild. Now, most of the time when you're messing with at least a Traxxas slipper clutch, you may be able to just repolish sand down the slipper pads and the slipper disc and reuse them. Under extreme conditions though, if you overheated or started melting plastic, you will want to replace all the parts, and that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to show you how to replace and inspect every single part. So we'll start with removing it. On this slipper clutch design, we just have a nut that tightens against the spring. That's your adjustment setting. If we back this nut all the way off, we can remove the whole slipper assembly. So I'm backing that off. Then the spring comes off. The gear slides off. There's a bearing that goes in the center of the gear. This one's fried, so we're going to chuck that. You can see that the gear on this design, on Traxxas slipper clutch, the gear bolts to the slipper pads. And this is all fried. You can see here we sheared some of the aluminum away because it got so hot. These wore down to a point where this aluminum was contacting the other plate here, and I'll show you that. This is our slipper disc. This is what the pads slip against, and you can see on this side how hot it got, all the scoring, heat scoring on there. This is a lot like a brake disc on a full-size car. If we see scoring like that, you can sand this with a 200 grit sandpaper, sand it down, and you can sand these pads if everything else is in good shape. But in this condition, we have worn down parts. These pads are overheated, they're starting to crumble, so we're going to replace it. I'll set this aside. And the last piece is the back plate for the slipper. You can see again the shiny aluminum in the center. That means it was being ground down on. Our bearing was actually hurting that, so we're going to replace this one as well. And on the back side, there's a slot for a small pin that goes in the output shaft in the transmission. So here's your little pin. Keep an eye on that. If you're buying the rebuild kit, they'll give you a new one of those. We'll set this all aside. I'll get the truck out of the way. We can focus a little bit on our rebuild kit. So what I have here in the rebuild kit, and this is part number 5352X from Traxxas. They give us a new disc, nice and shiny, 3 new pads, our spring, our nut, and these objects here are for other cars. So this slipper rebuild covers the Revo, the Summit, I believe the Jado as well, and maybe even the Slash 4x4. You have to check your parts diagram to make sure it has everything you need, but this is everything we need. These 2 washers we're not using. We'll set these aside. Here's the extra pin. Keep that. Extra nut for the Jado, I believe, so we're not going to be using that. This is what we're focusing on today. I also have in this package our new back plate. You can see the difference between this one and our old one. This spot here that contacts the bearing is not ground down like the old one, so we'll chuck this one away. And the new pad holder, because on our old one, again, you can see right there it started to grind away at it. That's not going to hold our bearing anymore, so it's junk. We're getting rid of that old setup. Got these new pieces. I got a new Spur gear. Why did I get a new Spur gear? Well, ours got so hot, it started to melt. You can see right there, the plastic's starting to melt, so the bearing doesn't fit in there tight anymore. So we're junking that for a new one. And last but not least, the bearing itself. Now this is a 5 by 11 by 4 millimeter bearing. You can buy it from Traxxas if you'd like. I got a Boca bearing here for today, just what we had at the shop. This is everything we need to rebuild the slipper clutch kit. Now again, if you do not have hard damage on your old pieces, specifically the pads and the disc, you can take 200 grit sandpaper, sand these rough again so there's no shiny spots, and you should be able to get more life out of it. But ours got so hot, we're replacing everything. So we start with the slipper pad holder, if you will. This bolts to the gear. And pay attention as you're putting it together. There's a front and a back side for the gear. The front side has the lettering on the gear to show you, well, it's showing us it's a 0.8 mod as well as a 68 tooth. So there we know it's the front, and this bolts to the back. So we'll set that on the back, set that down, steal the screws from the old one. We'll put it on our new setup. Now these screws, you don't want to tighten too much. You want to get them snug. But if you tighten them too much, you can actually warp that plate, crack it, or warp your gear. So when you're putting these in, just go to it snug. And I'm going to tighten them when I have them all in to make sure I'm not stressing one side over the other. Put that in. And the last screw. Now I can start snugging these down all the way. Just making sure they're just snug. Again, you don't have to wrench on these. The gear's not going anywhere. Just a little hand tight. Perfect. Check them. Okay, now we have new back plate for the Spur gear. Now the pads are going to go on here. You can see they have little holes in them that line up with the holes on the plate. They're going to set right in there. This is going to be a little frustrating later on because they're going to want to fall off. So as we're putting the thing together, we're going to have to orientate it to make sure these don't fall off. If I tip this upside down, oh, mine are holding pretty good. I got lucky. You might not be so lucky. They want to fall off real easy, but here we are. They're held on. If you want to put a little bit of glue on them, you could. I don't do it just so it's easy to replace them later. So we got that. Our new disc, what I do with these is I take some contact cleaner and I spray it off just because there's a little bit of oil on these from the factory, and the oil is not going to help our slipper clutch any, so just a quick spray so I know there's no oil, nice and clean. Now we have most of our assembly ready to go. Now obviously this plate is going to rest on our back plate, and you'll see there are 4 notches in it. Those line up with the notches on the plate. That's very important that it locks in place like that. Set that aside. And our bearing goes right into the gear. Just push it in until it stops. So now we're all set. I'm going to bring the truck back. First thing is our pin. I'm putting in a new pin. Got a new part, might as well use it. It's kind of tricky and it doesn't fall out, so we'll set it in there nice and level. You can see the pins in. Now comes our back plate. Now I'm going to take the slipper plate off for now because it's going to want to fall off, so I'm going to leave it off until I'm ready to put the whole assembly on. Line up the notch on the back plate with your pin. My pin's not behaving. Keep it dead centered and this will slip right over. Again, maybe a little spot of glue will help you here, but if you can do without, you'd be better off later when you're trying to take it apart. So I got my back plate on, it's locked on, I can spin it and the truck moves, so I know that's good. Now we're going to grab our new assembly we prepared before, our plate, put the plate on, and you're going to have to kind of hold it in place. Make sure you line it up with those notches, and I'm holding it with my hand while I slip the gear over just until I get it on far enough that I can line it up. Alright, just like that. So I slid it over and I'm putting a little bit of tension against this to hold that plate in place so it doesn't fall off. So again, holding that nice and tight. Grab your new spring, slide it on over. The new lock nut. And put this guy on. Actually, it's the smaller of the two. There we go. Put it on so you just have enough tension to hold the assembly together. Now I can let go. That's not going anywhere. Now what we want to do to set this is tighten this nut down until the spring is completely compressed. And you know it's compressed when there's no space between the coils. So we'll tighten it all the way down and then back it off 1/4 to a 1/2 turn. And that's going to be your first slipper clutch setting. It's not the final setting. It's something you're always going to be adjusting, but it's a good starting point. So I'm going to turn this, I'm actually turning the truck to tighten it instead of the nut, till the spring is flat. And now I know I'm leaving a little bit of space here. Now I know that it's preloaded and ready for run. Now when you're testing it out on the field, you want the slipper clutch set so that when you're first giving it gas off the line, it slips just a little bit and then the truck takes off. And you'll hear it slip. It's kind of a unique whining noise that it makes. So make sure you got a little bit of slip. If you ever lock this down, you're risking your whole driveline. Something's going to snap. So keep an eye on the slipper clutch. This is something that you got to adjust every hour or so runtime, or more if you're really hard on your truck. Because we have the Mama Monster on here, we check this every runtime because it's always wearing down. So keep that in mind as you're running. That's it for this tutorial, guys. You got a slipper clutch rebuild. If you have any questions, post below, or you can comment on RC Nightmare forums. We'll get all your questions answered there. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.